although humans have advanced technologically substantially, our brains still are primal in nature. Our brains are wired to keep us alive. That is the reason we are still here today. But they are not programmed to help us thrive, to make us happy, or even to help us in a technological world. There are many wired examples of hardwired human instincts that keep us alive. Perhaps the most obvious case is the fight or flight response, coined by Harvard University physiologist Walter Cannon in 1915. When humans are faced with danger or stress, a biological trigger helps us decide whether to stay and fight or get the heck out of there, which is flight. When we're stressed or staring danger in the face, the brain's hypothalamus is activated. It initiates a series of chemical releases and nerve cell responses that get us ready for the impending scenario. Adrenaline is released into the bloodstream. Our heart rate increases, blood is pumped more quickly into our muscles and limbs. Our awareness, sight, and impulses all intensify and quicken. You can thank our caveman ancestors for this one. Early man faced a lot of dangers, and the fight or flight response evolved to help them evade or battle those dangers in order to survive. Today, it's what allows an ordinary Joe to rush into a burning building or a mother of three to lift a car off one of her children, a phenomenon known as hysterical strength. Another way we seem to be hardwired to survive is in how we pick and choose our reproductive partners. Humans all have different genes that help determine how our immune systems work. Some people are better at fending off certain sicknesses more than others. When we pick reproductive partners, they would identify a set of genes that supports an immune system different from our own. The way the offspring would get both sets of genes and be able to fight off a larger range of sickness and disease. People today still seek those traits that made survival possible during the Stone Age. An instinct to fight furiously when threatened, a drive to trade information and share secrets. Human beings are, in other words, hardwired. You can take the person out of the Stone Age, but you can't take the Stone Age out of the person. The genes that survive environmental and sexual selection are passed on to succeeding generations. The Homo sapien brain made survival in the unpredictable environment of Africa's vast savanna plain possible. The human brain became hardwired to survive and reproduce as clan hunting foragers. For most of our history, this is how people lived, until their world radically changed with the invention of agriculture 10,000 years ago. This suddenly allowed people to accumulate wealth and live in large numbers and in greater concentrations, and freed many from hand-to-mouth living. From this agricultural period, fast and short steps have brought us to modern civilization, with its enormous social changes, wrought us by advanced technology and communications. But there are two reasons that humans have not changed their minds and thought patterns since then. One, there has been no constant new environmental pressure on people that requires further adaptation. In other words, no eruptions of volcanoes or glaciers plowing south have changed the weather or the food that supply people's brains. 2. 10,000 years isn't a long time in the scheme of things. And the way we supply food, build communities, and reproduce hasn't really changed. Emotions before reason. In an uncertain world, those who survived always had their emotional radar. Call it instinct turned on. And Stone Age people, at the mercy of wild predators or impending natural disasters, came to trust their instincts above all else. That requires an instinct undoubtedly saved human lives, allowing those who possessed keen instincts to reproduce. So for human beings, no less than for any other animal, emotions are the first screen to all information received. People, not risk takers. Human beings who survive the harsh elements of the Stone Age undoubtedly tried to avoid loss. After all, when you are living on the edge, to lose even a little would mean that your very existence was in jeopardy. Thus it follows that ancient hunter-gatherers, who had just enough food and shelter to survive, weren't big risk takers. In the Stone Age, this cautious approach to lose certainly increased human beings' chances of staying alive, and thus reproducing. Their descendants, with this genetic inheritance, would therefore also be more likely to avoid loss. Sometimes our ancestors lived below the margin, with barely enough food to get by and no secure shelter. Or they experienced a direct threat to their lives from a predator, a natural disaster, or another human being. Certainly, those human beings willing to do anything to save themselves would be those that lived to pass on the genes that encoded such determination. Thus, we are hardwired to avoid loss when comfortable, but to scramble madly when threatened. Confidence before realism. In the unpredictable and often terrifying condition of the Stone Age, those who survived surely were those who believed they would survive. Their confidence strengthened and emboldened them, attracted allies, and brought them resources. In addition, people who appeared self-confident were more attractive as mates. They looked as if they were hardy enough to survive and prosper. Thus, people who radiated confidence were those who ended up with the best chances of passing on their genes. Classification. In the Stone Age, to prosper in the clan, human beings had to become experts at making judicious alliances. They had to know whom to share resources with. They had to know what trustworthy people genuinely looked like. Thus, human beings became hardwired to stereotype people based on very small pieces of evidence, mainly their looks and a few readily apparent behaviors. Whether it was sorting berries or people, both worked to the same end. Classification made life simpler and saved time and energy. Every time you had food to share, you didn't have to figure out who could and couldn't be trusted. Your classification system told you instantly. Every time a new group came into view, you could pick out the high-status members not to alienate. And the faster you made decisions like these, the more likely you were to survive. And so classification remains with us today. People naturally sort others into in-groups and out-groups just by their looks and actions. We subconsciously and sometimes consciously label other people. She's a snob or he's a flirt. Success. Males frequently set up contests such as games and battles with the clear winners and losers. Likewise, they displayed their status and mental gifts in elaborate public rituals and artistic displays. The underlying purpose of such practice was to impress others. Successful, that is, high status and healthy males were thought to produce strong and intelligent offspring. For their part, women tried to be the most attractive, so they could have their pick of the available males. We may wish human beings were more rational, but our brains, created for a different time and place, get in the way. Organizational design. The family is the centerpiece of all human societies. Many qualified monogamy, pair bonding necessary for the prolonged care of the young. But no family would have survived the Stone Age without additional support, and thus was born the clan, or an extended family built through marriages, that is, mating with other families. Hierarchy. Wealth in the hunter-gatherer world was different than ours today. Food, clothing, and shelter was less predictable. Those who were rich, quote-unquote, one season could easily become poor the next. Still, we can assume that some people regularly did better than others, and thereby accrued status. When it came time to pick alliances, they were sought out, and when it came to pick leaders, they were chosen. Wealth mattered in the social relations of Stone Age people, were probably no more than another status symbol. Reproductive quality. Females came to believe that dominant males produced stronger babies, more likely to survive the elements. Males sought females who appeared healthy and fertile. Our challenges may be different from hunter-gatherers, but our own hardwiring is not. The desire to obtain status in organizational settings is simply part of human nature. Going with your gut. Relying on your intuition genuinely has a bad reputation, where analytical thinking has been steadily promoted over the past decade. However, this attitude is based on a myth of cognitive process. Emotions are actually not dumb responses that always need to be ignored or even corrected by rationality. They are appraisals of what you just experienced or thought of. In this sense, they're also a form of information processing. Intuition or gut feelings are also the result of a lot of processing that happens in the brain. Research suggests that the brain is a large predictive machine, constantly comparing incoming sensory information and current experience against stored knowledge and memories of previous experiences, and predicting what will come next. Scientists call this predictive processing framework. This ensures that the brain is always as prepared to deal with the current situation as optimally as possible. When a mismatch occurs, something that wasn't predicted, your brain updates its cognitive models. This match between prior models based on past experiences and current experience happens automatically and subconsciously. Intuition occurs when your brain has made a significant match or mismatch between the cognitive model and current experience, but this has not yet reached a conscious awareness. When you have a lot of experience in certain areas, the brain has more information to match the current experience against. This makes your intuitions more reliable. This means that, as with creativity, your intuition can actually improve with experience. In physiological literature, intuition is often explained as one of two general models of thinking, along with analytical reasoning. Intuitive thinking is described as automatic, fast, and subconscious. Analytical thinking, on the other hand, is slow, logical, conscious, and deliberate. Many take the division between analytical and intuitive thinking to mean that the two types of process or thinking styles are opposite, working in a seesaw manner. However, according to recent studies, analytical and intuitive thinking are typically not correlated and could happen at the same time. Indeed, the two thinking styles are in fact complementary and can work in concert. We regularly employ them together. While simply using intuition can be sloppy and inaccurate, simply using analytical thinking may consist of justifications or rationalizations of decisions. We can overanalyze, which may close the window of opportunity, or cause us to reason our way out of doing something. We have to see intuition for what it is, a fast, automatic, subconscious processing style that can provide us with the very useful information that analyzing can't. We need to accept that intuitive and analytical thinking should occur together and be weighed up against each other in different decision-making situations.